He was 17 years old, black, brilliant, standing in the hallway of one of the most expensive schools in Los Angeles, wearing a clean gray hoodie and spotless white sneakers, carrying a backpack with a small origami pin on the zipper, the only thing in that building that truly belonged to him. He wasn't causing trouble. He wasn't asking for anything. He was simply standing there, existing, waiting for the afternoon to end. And then a man in a navy blazer looked at him the way certain people look at certain things, and said, quietly, casually, as if it were simply a fact about the weather, "You smell like this streets." No anger, no guilt, just the effortless certainty of a man who had never once been asked to justify what came out of his mouth. The boy didn't react, didn't fight back. He had learned, in 17 years of being looked at that way, that reacting was exactly what they wanted. So he did something else. He reached into his pocket and sent 3 words to the one person in his life who had never once asked him to make himself smaller. What happened next, that man in the navy blazer never saw coming. Because what he didn't know, what no one in that gleaming, marble-floored school could have imagined, was who was about to walk through those doors. A Korean Mafia boss, in a gray tailored suit, with dragon tattoos rising up his neck, and eyes that didn't blink. And he had already spent 3 hours that morning learning everything there was to know about Richard Hargrove. Everything. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and click Join to become a member and help our channel. There are places in this world designed to make certain people feel small before they even open their mouths. Westlake Academy was one of those places. You could feel it the moment you walked through the front doors. The weight of the marble floors, the height of the ceilings, the way the light came through the glass like it had been commissioned to arrive at exactly that angle. Everything about that building whispered the same message to the same people, over and over, in a language that never needed words. You don't belong here. Most of the students who heard that message came from families who had spent generations learning to ignore it. They had been trained, at dinner tables, on country club lawns, in the back seats of cars with leather seats, to move through spaces like Westlake as if they had built them. And in some cases, their families had. Jordan Ellis had not been trained that way. He had been trained to survive, to read a room before entering it, to know exactly where the exits were, not out of fear, but out of habit. The kind of habit that gets passed down not through words, but through instinct. Through the way a father's jaw tightens when a stranger looks too long. Through the way a neighborhood teaches a child that attention is rarely a gift. He stood near the column in the Westlake Saguaro that afternoon, the way he stood in most places. Present, but contained. His gray hoodie was clean. His Air Force Ones were spotless. The small origami pin on his backpack caught the light once, briefly, and meant nothing to anyone in that hallway except him. He was waiting. He was always waiting, in one form or another, for the moment when a place like this would either accept the fact of him or reveal that it never intended to. That moment arrived wearing a navy blazer. Richard Hargrove moved through that hallway the way men like him always moved, with the particular ease of someone who had never once been asked to justify his presence anywhere. He was the kind of man who had long since confused familiarity with ownership. He knew the names of the right people. He shook hands the right way. He laughed at the right volume. He looked at Jordan the way people look at something that doesn't match the room. Not with hostility, exactly, but with the mild, effortless certainty of a man who had decided the answer before asking the question. The words came quietly, conversationally, the way the worst things often do. You can tell, where people come from. You smell like the streets. He said it and walked away. Just like that. The way you comment on the weather. The way you say a thing because it is simply, obviously, true. And truth requires no apology. Jordan didn't move. He breathed. He looked down at the origami pin. He had learned, over 17 years of navigating worlds that were not built for him, that some moments required stillness above everything else. That reacting was what they wanted, proof that you were exactly what they had already decided you were. So he was still. But his hand, very slowly, reached into his pocket. And he typed 3 words to the one person in his life who had never once asked him to explain himself. Somewhere across the city, in an office that most people in that school would never be allowed to enter, a phone screen lit up. Park Hyun-jae read the message once. He set the phone down. He reached for his jacket. There is a particular kind of silence that follows a man like Park Hyun-jae into a room. It is not the silence of absence. It is the silence of recalibration. The moment when every person present, without fully understanding why, adjusts something. A posture, a tone, the direction of a gaze. It happens before the mind catches up to the instinct, which means it is honest in a way that most social performances are not. Hyun-jae had walked into a great many rooms over the course of his life. Rooms where the wrong word meant the wrong outcome. Rooms where silence was a negotiation tactic, where stillness was a weapon, where the man who spoke first had already lost. He had learned, in those rooms, that power rarely announced itself. It didn't need to. The people who truly had it understood that the loudest presence in a space was almost never the most dangerous one. He drove to Westlake Academy alone. No driver, no escort. The kind of men who needed to be seen arriving did not interest him. He parked without ceremony, walked through the front entrance without stopping at the desk, and when the young administrator started to rise from her chair with a visitor badge in hand, something in the angle of his approach made her sit back down without quite knowing why. He found the auditorium. He stood at the back, and across the rows of blazers and pearls and leather-bound programs, his eyes found Jordan immediately. The way they always did, in any room. The way a man learns to find the one person in the world whose safety has become the organizing principle of everything he does. Jordan felt him before he saw him. Turned. Looked. Something passed between them that had no name in any language either of them spoke out loud. Hyun-jae moved to stand beside his son. He did not sit. He did not reach for a program. He simply stood, present, still, and quietly immovable, while the ceremony continued around them as if the temperature in the back of that room had not shifted by several degrees. Jordan stared ahead. "I told you not to come." "I know. People look. People always look." A pause, brief and absolute. "Where is he?" Jordan didn't answer right away. The ceiling lights hummed. Somewhere near the front, a father laughed too loudly at something a dean had said. Jordan's jaw moved once, almost imperceptibly. Then he tilted his chin, the smallest possible gesture, toward the second row. Hyun-jae looked. Richard Hargrove was leaning back in his chair with the relaxed authority of a man at a function he had attended many times before. He was not watching the stage particularly carefully. He was the kind of man who attended events to be seen attending them, not to witness what happened inside them. His blazer was unrumpled. His watch caught the light. He looked in every measurable way, completely comfortable. Hyunjae studied him for exactly as long as he needed to. Then he looked away. He did not speak again until the ceremony ended. It was as the families began to filter toward the exits, the particular shuffle of expensive shoes on polished floors, the low murmur of parents collecting children like items retrieved from storage, that Richard Hargrove turned and found himself looking at Jordan Ellis standing next to a man he had not expected. He stopped. The calculus happened visibly on his face. The tuxedo-calibrated social software running its assessment. The suit, yes, clearly expensive, clearly intentional. But the neck, the stillness, the eyes that had already been watching him for longer than he realized. He laughed, the reflex of a man who uses warmth as a first line of defense. So this is the father. He looked at Jordan, then back at Hyunjae. The pause between the two glances was a sentence in itself. Interesting. Hyunjae said nothing. The silence seemed to confuse Richard, who was accustomed to silences that waited for him to fill them. He pressed forward with the particular confidence of a man who had never once been made to feel that his words cost him anything. Look, if the kid got upset about what I said, that's not really... the school has a certain standard. Parents have a right to know who their children are spending time with. It's nothing personal. He opened his hands slightly as he said it. The gesture of a reasonable man making a reasonable point to other reasonable people. Nothing personal. Hyunjae repeated the words, not as a question, not with anger, with the quiet, unhurried attention of a man lifting an object to examine it from every angle before deciding what to do with it. He took one step forward. And Richard Hargrove, without a single conscious thought, took one step back. There is a moment, and every person who has ever stood on the wrong side of real power knows this moment intimately, when the body understands something the mind is still refusing to accept. Richard Hargrove's mind was still composing a sentence. His body had already stopped pretending. The step back had been involuntary. He was aware of that, which made it worse. Men like Richard had built entire architectures of self-image on the foundational belief that they did not step back, that they were the ones other people made room for, that the particular combination of school ties and firm handshakes and the right kind of casual confidence constituted a kind of invisible armor that the world had always, without exception, respected. He was discovering, in real time, that the world had simply never sent him the right messenger until now. Hyunjae did not rush. He never rushed. Rushing was for men who were afraid of what would happen if they paused. He crossed the remaining distance between himself and Richard Hargrove with the same unhurried certainty with which he did everything. And then both hands moved, simultaneously, deliberately, and closed around the lapels of the navy blazer. Not a strike, not a shove. Something more precise than either. A grip. The kind that communicates, without ambiguity, that the person holding on has made a considered decision to do so, and has made equally considered decisions about far more consequential things than this, and that the distance between where things currently stood and where they could go was entirely a matter of the next few seconds. Richard's breath caught. His hands came up, not aggressively, not with any real intention, just the reflex of a man whose body was sending emergency signals that his pride was still trying to override. Carter had gone completely still near the doorway. Jordan had not moved. He stood exactly where he had been standing, arms at his sides, and watched with the particular stillness of someone who had learned very early that some moments required you to simply bear witness. The faces were inches apart now. Hyunjae's expression had not changed. That was the part that was most difficult to process. Not the grip, not the proximity, but the absolute absence of heat in his eyes. There was no rage there, no performance of intimidation. There was only attention. The complete, undivided, forensic attention of a man who was seeing Richard Hargrove very, very clearly. When he spoke, his voice was low enough that it existed only in the space between them. "You mentioned standard." Richard said nothing. His throat moved. "My son has the highest grade point average in this school." The hands did not loosen. "Do you know where your son ranks?" The question hung there. Richard's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "Carter is 12th. A pause so controlled it felt architectural. "My son helped him climb from 17th. Something shifted in Richard's face. The social software was failing now, crashing against a situation it had no template for, no rehearsed response to, no exit route that preserved the version of himself he had walked in wearing. "About standard," Hyunjae continued, and his voice carried the particular calm of a man reading from a document he had long since memorized. "I know your name, Richard Hargrove. I know the name of your company. I know the contracts you have signed in the last 3 years." A breath. "And I know the ones you should not have signed." The color did not drain from Richard's face gradually. It left all at once, the way light leaves a room when the switch is thrown. His jaw tightened, but it was the tightening of a man trying to hold a structure together from the inside, not the tightening of defiance. Carter was watching his father, and in the way that children often see the truest version of their parents, only in the moments their parents least expect to be seen, he was watching very carefully. "This is not a threat." Hyunjae said it the same way he had said everything else, quietly, without decoration. "It is context, so that the conversation about standard is more complete." Then, slowly, with the same deliberate care with which he had taken hold, he released the blazer. Both hands opened. He smoothed the lapels once, a single brief gesture, almost courteous, the way you straighten something you have no intention of damaging permanently. He turned away from Richard Hargrove, as if the man had simply ceased to require his attention. He walked back to Jordan, and without a word, without a backward glance, they moved together toward the exit, the man in the gray suit and the boy in the gray hoodie, while behind them, in the amber light of the Westlake Auditorium, Richard Hargrove stood with his blazer crooked and his hands at his sides, and the very specific expression of a person who had just been shown, with absolute precision, exactly how much space he actually occupied in the world. Carter looked at his father for a long moment. His father did not look back. The evening air outside Westlake Academy carried the particular coolness of a Los Angeles night that had not yet decided what it wanted to be. Warm enough to walk in, cool enough to feel the edge of something ending. Jordan pushed through the front doors first. Hyunjae followed, one step behind, the way he always positioned himself in open spaces. Not in front, not beside, but at the angle that covered the most ground. Old habits, the kind that had kept him alive through things he had never described to anyone, least of all to the boy walking ahead of him now. They crossed the courtyard in silence. The marble fountain at the center caught the last light of the afternoon and threw it in small, indifferent pieces across the stone path. Somewhere behind them, through the tall glass doors, the polished world of Westlake Academy continued its careful performance. Parents collecting children, deans shaking hands, the whole elaborate ceremony of belonging conducted with the precision of people who had rehearsed it so many times they had forgotten it was a performance at all. Jordan stopped walking when they reached the edge of the parking lot. He turned. He looked at his father the way he had learned to look at him over the years. Not with the wide-open trust of a child who had never been disappointed by the world, but with something harder and more valuable than that. Something earned. The look of a person who had been given enough reasons not to trust and had chosen to anyway. "Did you actually know all of that?" he asked. "About Hargrove, the contracts." Hyunjae did not answer immediately. He looked out at the parking lot, at the row of luxury cars sitting in the blue evening like a catalog of a certain kind of life. Then he looked back at his son. "I knew it this morning." Jordan was quiet for a moment. "You researched him? In one day?" "In 3 hours." The words landed without drama, without pride, stated the way facts are stated by people who have never needed to perform competence, because competence has always simply been the price of survival. Jordan looked down at the origami pin on his backpack. He had carried it for 4 years. Hyunjae had made it the night Jordan first came home. Not as a gift, exactly, not wrapped or presented, but left on the kitchen table without explanation, the way the man did most things that mattered to him. Without announcement, without the need for the gesture to be witnessed, to be real. "You didn't have to come. You sent me a message. I was just telling you what happened. I wasn't asking you to—" "I know." Hyunjae turned to look at him fully now, not the sideways attention he gave to rooms and exits and the peripheral movements of strangers, but the direct, unguarded look he reserved for almost no one. "But you told me, and I am your father, and he said that my son smells like the streets." The sentence arrived without heat, without theater. It arrived the way certain truths arrive. Not as an argument, but as a wall. Something that simply exists and cannot be moved by disagreement. I grew up on a street in Incheon where the smell was dried fish and wet concrete, and the particular kind of cold that gets inside a building and never fully leaves. He paused. "You grew up on a street in this city. We both carry that. We both arrived here anyway." His eyes did not waver. "He does not get to use that against you. Not in front of me. Not in front of anyone." Jordan did not respond right away. The fountain behind them continued its small, useless work. A car started somewhere in the lot. The city beyond the school walls hummed its permanent, indifferent hum. That specific frequency of Los Angeles at dusk, when the day has not yet surrendered to the night, and everything feels briefly, improbably suspended. "He was scared of you." "Yes." "Was any of it real? What you said about the contracts?" Hyunjae considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "Real enough." Jordan almost smiled. Almost. It arrived at the corner of his mouth and stopped there, which was, for him, the equivalent of a full smile. Restrained, the way everything about him was restrained. The way you learn to keep things small when the world has spent years telling you that taking up space is a risk. But it was there. It was real. They walked to the car. Hyunjae unlocked it without ceremony. They got in. He started the engine and pulled out of the Westlake parking lot the same way he had arrived. Without announcement, without spectacle, without any particular need for the moment to be larger than it was. They drove in silence for several minutes. The kind of silence that is not absence, but texture. The accumulated weight of a day that had asked too much of a 17-year-old boy and received, in return, more dignity than most men twice his age would have managed. It was Jordan who broke it. Not with a question, not with a thank you. With something smaller and more specific. The kind of thing you say only to someone you trust completely. Only in the dark interior of a car. Only when the performance of the day is finally, mercifully, over. He really thought I didn't belong there. Hyunjae kept his eyes on the road. I know. Like it was just obvious to him. Like he didn't even have to think about it. I know. Does that ever stop? A long silence. The city moved past the windows in its familiar blur of light and motion, and the 10,000 private stories of people who would never know each other. Hyunjae thought about the street in Incheon, about the rooms he had walked into, and the looks he had received, and the years it had taken him to understand that those looks said everything about the people giving them, and nothing about him. He thought about a boy left behind by a world that had decided, before he could speak, what he was worth. He thought about a kitchen table, an origami pin, the particular silence of a child learning, for the first time, that someone had chosen him. No, he said finally. It does not stop. Jordan absorbed that, nodded once, slowly, the way you nod at something that hurts but is also, in its honesty, a form of respect. But, Hyunjae added, and his voice carried something that was not comfort exactly, something older and harder and more durable than comfort. You learn what it is worth. The car moved through the city. The night settled fully now, the last light gone. Los Angeles burning in its 10,000 separate fires the way it always did. Indifferent, relentless, beautiful in the way that things are beautiful when they do not care whether you find them so. Jordan looked out the window. The origami pin caught a passing streetlight once, briefly, and went dark again. And the two of them, the man who had built his world from the ground of a street in Incheon, and the boy who was still building his from the ground of a street in this city, drove home together through the burning dark, carrying between them the only thing that had ever made any of it survivable: each other. Jordan didn't scream. He didn't defend himself. He didn't try to prove anything to a man who had already decided what he was worth before he ever opened his mouth. He simply knew who he was, and he had someone beside him who knew it too. Now I need to ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where someone decided what you were worth before they ever truly knew you? Where someone used soft words, intense attention, or the language of care to make you feel smaller, stuck, or confused? So many women spend years trying to explain what they already know, trying to be understood by someone who benefits from their confusion. That's why the Woman He Can't Manipulate 30-Day Reset exists. A 30-day guided challenge created specifically for Black women 45 and over who are ready to stop second-guessing what they already see, rebuild their own standards, and become much harder to confuse. This isn't about becoming cold. It's not about shutting down. It's about becoming impossible to manipulate. If this story moved something in you, the link is in the pinned comment right below. Click it, read it, and decide for yourself. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever walked into a room and felt, before saying a single word, that someone had already decided you didn't belong there? Not because of anything you did, but simply because of who you are or where you came from? And have you ever had someone stand beside you without being asked, without needing the credit, and refuse to let that moment go unanswered? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about dignity, loyalty, and the quiet power of those who protect the people they love, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.